Good afternoon. Don Huffmeister here again with wanting to deliver a little bit of insight into the care and feeding of instrumental students between the grades of, say, 5th and 8th grade. Because I taught really in one district a significant part of my career, almost a quarter of a century, I'm able to give an overall perspective of the changes that took place in at least that one district. At the time that I was there, I was handling about 80 students to begin with, in grades 5 through 8. This was considered a full load, and I think it probably was. It certainly felt like it at the time. And I think that that was based on, to some degree, an ideal perception that the state of Minnesota educational department had as guidelines for instructional provisions for instrumental students at that time. And they were envisioning this paragraph that I'm about to read of an elementary school of about 400 students, and out of those 400 students they estimated that about 15% would participate in instrumental music, meaning that you'd have about 60 students. But this is the way the paragraph reads. 400, which in the remainder of this chapter will be considered the unit, requires one grade school instrumental teacher or his equivalent, 2 half-time or 4 quarter-time instructors. It may be expected that at least 15% of these 400 or 60 pupils will participate in the instrumental program if it is adequately promoted and properly administered. So you could see that that's what they were working towards as a load for an instrumental instructor handling kids between the 5th in the 8th grade. And I think then on that basis we can do a little bit of math. If you have 80 students and you give them 20-minute lessons, which I was doing, what you'll come up with is about 26 hours of individual instruction to the kids, which is what we did. We taught them out of the instrument book that they were working on. In other words, in the clarinet book we were using the thru bank and so on. Any rate, as the district began to grow, of course, what happened is we began to get more and more students, and pretty soon my numbers were running close to 100, at which time I decided that it would be necessary to cut the time back that the kids had, so we cut it back to 15 minutes, and then what you have is about 25 hours of instructional time you're going to be giving out, plus the band, the elementary bands, and the intermediate band. Once we got to 120 students, now a different picture began to evolve, because you're of course starting more kids in the summertime, you've got more things to take care of, and at 120 students you can't now handle them all on an individual lesson basis, so you're going to go to small groups of like instruments, which is what I did. When you do that, though, there's a compromise right away, which is you're probably going to go to some kind of group method of one kind or another. And as I said before, many of the group methods are thought out very, very well. The authors of them have done an excellent job with them, but they're not the same as the individual instruction books that we used prior to using the group method. So at any rate, you can see that as the numbers increased, the amount of instructional time went down. Now, what does this have to do with the elementary band? Well, the elementary band and the instruction that those kids get is essential for anything to happen beyond that at the intermediate level or the high school. I mean, nothing's going to happen unless that elementary is done well. And as we well know, in the last few years, maybe 20 years or more, anytime there's been a cut for instructional help in the music program, it'll come out of that elementary or the intermediate program more than likely. And so what's happened is the instructors at those levels are handling more and more students. And then sometimes in some districts, you know, they cut out the elementary completely, and you can get by with that a little bit, but then of course what you find out is you don't have anything going on above it, and eventually, you know, the high school band won't be able to play the Star Spangled Banner. So at any rate, what I want to get at here is that in the elementary school, you're going to be giving lessons that are probably like instrument lessons, and that's fine. You're going to have a band, and as I had it, it was met twice a week for 35 to 40 minutes. The kids were brought in on a high school bus. In many of the schools now, that's not happening. It's not happening in the district that I taught in. What has happened is usually parents will bring the children in, and sometimes kids from multiple schools will go to one location, and you'll have one rehearsal a week that way. Well, we all know that isn't very much. You're going to see them once a week in band and once a week for lessons. So ultimately, I highly recommend the elementary band be at least twice a week. And if it is twice a week, whether you do it in the morning or you're able to squeeze it in during a lunch hour, which of course is problematic in its own right, still the fact of the matter is you've seen the kids twice rather than once for band. Then, if you can actually do it, schedule the kids for lessons on the days that they don't have band. Now that can be problematic depending on where the schools are, but my idea there is, and I did carry it out, was that then I was seeing those kids at least 3 times a week, and that offered me the opportunity of building responsibility into them to bring their horn to school, to be at the lessons and so on. So I would do all of the follow-up that would take place if they weren't there. Like, why weren't you at your lesson? Is that helping you learn? And so on. And the same thing with the band. So that was an important reason why I wanted that elementary contingent of the program to stay strong and for me to see them as much as they could. Now I'd like to go on with this a little more, but I think I'll do it in another part, and I'll stop here for now because this is what I would call the care and feeding of your elementary students, and if we don't do that, they won't be around to help out in the band program or learn very much about instrumental music without it. Okay, thanks a lot. Don Hoffmeister.